integrating all of the people who joined online during the plague year into the real life SCA. I mean, these are people who've never been to an event, who've been in the society for a year. How do we introduce people to our culture? How do we take people who have been educated over the past year to despise fedora wearing people who call you my lady and turn them into people who are not going to giggle hysterically when they go into a real SCA event and see that sort of thing happening in real time? So that is a set of structures that are going to get us from trying to understand where we need to go to doing serious program and project management around it. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment. I've been talking continuously for about half an hour. And what I'd like to ask you guys to do is contribute some ideas about how you might have described required future state in the past, what kinds of pathways you've drawn in the past as part of strategic planning in your society life, and perhaps most important, how program and project managing fits into the way that you turn concepts into reality. And I'll put a time limit on it. I don't want to spend more than 5 minutes doing this because I want to have some time to talk about the horizon scanning as well. So do I see any hands of Zoom from people who want to contribute? And I'll add concepts into the notes as we go. I see that Caesar and Telenor have got hands up, although Caesar is applauding. Maybe he's just appreciating the idea of being asked to put his hand up. I'm not seeing any biological hands, but if you have a biological hand, then you can put that into put a flag into chat to let us know that you're doing that. So Caesar first, and then I think I saw Telenor. Great, Caesar.
Good morning. What I've been, well, it's kind of more of a struggle, but trying to participate. I work with kids in the Kingdom of Kayib, and what I've been struggling after the plague is to get the kids together or create functions for kids to participate online. We created a private group for the parents so the kids could watch and learn Pell practices. I'm sorry, this is for youth combat. Pell practices, learning of different techniques and swordsmanship, even arts, heraldry. We try to form that. In terms of project management, that I learned along the way is work with your team, like not senior, but your colleagues in terms of creating little projects here and there to kind of like not overburden ourselves with online responsibilities, but to share the responsibility so it doesn't overwhelm us. And also to come up with new ideas and how we can encourage the children of our kingdom to be part of this, even though it's online and they prefer to be live and fighting with the buffers, but more of like a learning strategy for them to, when they come out of this plague, so they're ready to go and beat us up, in other words. So that's what I've been going through right now as a parent too.
Well, I appreciate that. And one of the things I think is really interesting is that what you sketch out is a really important approach, that is a youth-centered approach to youth activities and to youth combat in particular. And having a youth-centered approach gets around some safeguarding issues. That there are almost no safeguarding issues about having young teenagers working with their peer group, for instance, whereas I mean, I'm a Sunday school teacher, and the restrictions around who can and can't be on a Zoom with children are significant. So doing planning around a future, the future of the post-COVID world in a youth-centered way is non-trivial, and I appreciate that. Of course, getting youth to develop ideas can be challenging, as again, I know as a Sunday school teacher, because the look of dumb insolence that you can get back if you ask a group of especially young teenagers or preteens for some ideas is one of the most challenging looks you'll ever get in your whole life.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you're not talking about a trivial task, are you, Cesar?
No, it's an ongoing learning experience for sure. It's because we deal with a lot more younger than teenagers as well, and so we try to encourage them and help them understand that, hey, the reason why we can't get together is because of the pandemic.
Sure.
But here's other activities for you to participate, and it started to be okay. But for us, we have really strict bylaws or internal kingdom laws where we cannot really work with kids on the video, so they cannot see their faces. And so we try to work around that so that the parent is always going to be involved with the child. And so that's one of the technical aspects of that part that we have to be aware of to help protect the child. So we try to come up with ideas so that the little ones have something to do, the teenagers have something to do, and then in the meantime, participate as a kingdom, or in this case, barony, to help out encourage learning how to use combat or learning youth arts and sciences.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Teleanor, what was your idea?
So about a year and a half ago, when their majesties put the baronial coronet of the Westermark on my head, we looked up, Alistair, my co-baroness, and I looked up and saw that there were lots of problems that we needed to come up with a strategy to work on. So this might be that horizon scanning thing you're going to talk about soon in finding these problems. But we also thought that we really didn't have a lot of, well, to describe it in another way, we didn't know what our tribe was. So we went out and created one. We reached out to the other landed baronesses and barons of the West and slowly built up a community of all of the landed baroness and baronesses of the West. It took a while to find the far West, but we've finally got them all. What we discovered is that we have the same issues pretty much universally. And so not only are we doing our brainstorming and whatnot with the people within our branch, but also across branches. And that's turned out to be very, very useful. So find your tribe.
And I particularly appreciate your saying that, because here's me talking about the idea that these are all collaborative processes. If you're going to conduct structured brainstorming, you need a group of people to do that. And I think it's really important. When I work with clients in my business, one of the things we always say is give me diversity. And I don't mean when I want diversity that I need to see 4 British Asians and 2 Welsh speakers and things like that. What I mean by that is I need intellectual diversity. I need non-university graduates. I need university graduates. I need people who are in different professions. I need people from different backgrounds. One of the things people talked about was fee waivers. I mean, I run a business that thrives on uncertainty. The plague is being great for me professionally, but I know full well that there are people who've been ground down to powder by the plague. And without diversity, then my appreciation of that will be purely intellectual as opposed to being visceral. So I really appreciate the idea that understanding what is our tribe is part of building a community that is able to work as a tribe, and not just in a tribal way, but also in a broader way that enables diversity, intellectual diversity, to come to problem solving. I see one more hand, and then I'm gonna.
We have Seamus. Seamus has had his physical hand up.
Yeah. So Seamus, you're now rewarded for keeping your hand propped up there for so long. Speak to me.
Right. Okay. I was thinking that just something that when I'm kind of going on to the I guess plan steps that I find sometimes is helpful is this thing called SMART goals or smarter goals. You're probably familiar with them, but I find that a lot of times when I'm making the goals, or you're making the sort of what those objectives may be, that if you can make them meet the smarter goals in about one sentence or so, then you probably have a pretty good, fairly well defined goal or objective that you're going for. And then that can really help you keep your tasks and your steps and stuff more easily on task. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. And of course, it does us no harm to bring the structure of using SMART criteria into the way we work. I'm talking about a schema and pestles and all that, my default schema, and developing a particular schema, but also that is what SMART goals are. SMART is an acronym. It stands for, it's an initialism. It stands for specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-bound. And it's important that if we are going to turn our strategic concepts into practical plans and project manageable plans, that we have ideas like it must be time bound, it must be realistic. Can we apply the test of realism to an idea? Because there are brilliant ideas that we just can't afford or that we don't have time to do. And I love specific.
Also, I like the, so if you make your goals smarter, you add evaluation. So you evaluate whatever that is, and then you revise your plan to take into account whatever your assessment of that is, your
Yes.
evaluation of that, of those goals. So if it didn't work quite right, revise it and make it better.
Yeah, I taught for many years at a military academy at Sandhurst. And one of the things we used to teach the young officers was the idea that you don't just do your problem solving, but you iterate your problem solving, and you continuously iterate your problem solving. And you ask the question, what has changed? And when you ask that question, the answer always affects what you do next. So I really appreciate that, Seamus. It's a really useful point.
Yeah, thank you.
40-minute after warning.
Okay, we've got 10 minutes, and now I'm going to come to the most interesting part, and the part which I could easily spend all never mind all hour. I could easily spend all day on this part. So I'm going to try to be very disciplined. Horizon scanning is the first step in strategy. It's what you do before all of this. And the reason that you've got to do horizon scanning is that you need to understand the future, even though you cannot accurately predict the future. I do not foretell, for all foretelling is in vain, says Galadriel. And Galadriel says that because the author who creates Galadriel is an old soldier. And an old soldier knows better than anybody else that no plan ever survives contact with the enemy. And the enemy sometimes is Murphy, is Sod, is whatever can go wrong will go wrong, is friction. So what I'd like to do is talk about ways that we can take a structured approach to the future. And one reason to do this is because this is one of the things that we don't often instinctively do. I have never sat down to plan an SCA event and somebody said, right, let's do the horizon scanning first. I have not thought about what is the future of our principality and had somebody shout out, yeah, but first, before we talk about recruiting, let's talk about horizon scanning. So this is a methodology that I use for horizon scanning. It's called the cone of plausibility. And this is something that you can have a look around for. There's some excellent articles in Harvard Business Review about cone of plausibility. And when I need a veneer of respectability for my clients, that's what I send them. I send them those Harvard Business Review articles, and you can sign up to Harvard Business Review and read them for free. Cone of plausibility is part of horizon scanning. Now, in this graphic here on my tablet, I've scrawled the present on the left once again, and the future off to the right. And we move from the present to the future, of course, And we do not want to make that unbounded. We need to understand what a realistic time frame is to talk about. So the first thing we do when we horizon scan is we say, how far forward are we going to look? For the big event I described earlier, Raglan Fair, that's going to be, I hope, God willing, and the creek don't rise, that's going to be in August in Wales. And there is a time frame for me to use for planning between now and August. It could be that I need to look at the space from now to 12th night. 12th night coronation is the first event that I would reliably say we are almost certainly going to be able to run in person. Your world may be different, but Midsummer Coronation might have to be canceled. And of course, you're a lot of people here are West Kingdom, and you've got a slightly different time frame. But what's important here is we understand what time frame we're going to look at. There are 6 steps in the cone of plausibility methodology. I'm just going to sketch them. I'm going to have a quick canter through them. And then I'm going to just take 1 or 2 minutes to talk you through how we would do this. You get people to agree a time frame. How fast do we make decisions? What is our relevant next event or next change that we're going to look to? And then we describe a baseline future. A baseline future is a future which is based entirely on trend analysis. If things continue as they are now, what is going to happen? And of course, we all know that that's not what creates the future. We all know that the future is created by discontinuous events smashing into trends. A year ago today, nobody here would have predicted what they have done for the last 12 months. All of the trend analysis that anybody was using has been smashed to pieces by discontinuous events. So you describe the baseline future knowing full well that that does not adequately describe the future. And then you extract drivers. That is, you say, what drove this future? What created this future? And if anybody is going to extract the drivers for what's going to happen over the next 3 or 4 months, there are some pretty straightforward drivers we can expect to see. How many people are going to be vaccinated? How long will vaccination immunity last? How well are people going to be able to protect themselves against infectious disease between now and the time they have a reasonable level of immunity? How much money will people have to spend in a time of recession, if not depression? Those kind of drivers are going to affect our future. And we grade them. We decide what are the ones that are most significant and what is likeliest to change. And then we change one. We change one. We ask a question like, this will not make me popular, what if vaccination immunity only lasts 6 months? What does that mean to our emergence from the plague year? And we start telling stories about what that means. And those stories that we tell, if you go to anyone who didn't go to the session and tell them, yeah, we ran a session on what happens if vaccine immunity is 6 months, people say, yeah, well, that's not going to happen. But if you're there in the session discussing that, if you're doing the horizon scanning as part of your strategy process, you will be inoculating yourself against strategic shock. You will be enabling yourself to understand what might happen, and that will make your strategy robust. It is possibly the most important element of making structured strategy, because it forces you around your biases to imagine the unexpected. And then, once you've described that new future, you do it again. Go back and change another driver. If you've got time and space, you take your baseline, your trend analysis, and you develop two, maybe three additional, 2 or 3 plausible futures, you will have a scenario space that enables in-depth understanding of what's going to happen next. You won't be able to predict the future, like Galadriel says, not going to work, but you will be able to understand potential futures, and that will make your strategy robust. So I'll very briefly flash up that initial summary of what strategy is about. Coordinating ends, ways, and means to achieve an end state with 4 main steps. Horizon scan, and then with that understanding, describe the future you'll need, and then describe the big picture ways you're going to get there, and then do the homework of the program and project management that will make everything work properly on the day. Now I see I've got Caesar's hand raised, and I'm happy to take questions. And I'm happy to spend some time talking to you guys right now, but I understand that some people are going to have to go to other sessions. So if all has gone well, I've just put my SCA name, my real name, my website, and my email on there. You've got my real name, and you can find me on Facebook. The best way to get a hold of me is Facebook Messenger, because I've got 5,000 emails in my inbox, and I don't always see every email. And I see from some nodding heads, this is not the only, I'm not the only one who's in that position. So those of you who need to go in peace. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I've appreciated your attendance, your engagement, your involvement. And like I said, I see Caesar's hand up already, and I see a lot of really good stuff in the chat. So Caesar, speak to me.
Yeah,
Briefly, if you don't mind, would you like me to continue recording, or would you like me to stop the recording for this?
I'm happy for you to continue recording.
Okay, I can only do so for about 5 more minutes, and then I'll have to go to the next session.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
If you go back to the last slide, it's the 4 steps of your. Yes.
Yes.
Between the horizon scanning, describe the required future state, and all those 4 steps. Where's Plan B falls in? Just
Plan B is a really important concept, isn't it? One of the things I mentioned just now is that the young officers at Sandhurst are always trained to ask what has changed and then go back and change it. And that's important. But also, what you're describing is a requirement for contingency planning. What's the rain site? And you got a lot of people here in the West Kingdom, so you guys understand rain just about as well as we understand it here in England. And so the question, what is the rain site, is the basic example of exactly that. And when you project manage, one of the things that you've got to do is ensure that you program, that you ask serious questions about risk. And you create a risk register where you write down what the realistic risks are based on horizon scanning, and what the risks to your strategic planning and to your project are. And against each risk, you write down, and you could do this in an Excel spreadsheet. That's the best way to do it. During my time in British government, that's the way we did all of that stuff. Against each risk, you write who is responsible for it, looking after that risk, and you have a name. And beside that name, you write what the mitigation means are for that risk. And the sum of your mitigation means and the process of forcing yourself to talk about how you're going to mitigate each risk, that produces the basis for your contingency planning. And you might want to have a binder that has the answers to those questions. What do we do if? And have a contingency plan for each one. And for right now, for the restoration, you might very well want to have a list. When do we start recruiting again? When do we start putting deposits down on sites again? And that too is a contingency planning question. So it's a really appropriate question. And I really appreciate, and I see that I've been calling you Caesar because you had your mundane name up. And now I see that you've got your SCA name up. So I'll start calling you Thessar instead. But thank you very much for that question. I appreciate that, very apt. Are there any other points that we want to bring up? And before Seamus has to disappear and take us up, Seamus is going to disappear. And so anything we say after this point will go unrecorded. So you can swear or slander each other or all of those horrible things.
I actually had something I was going to bring up if that would be okay.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, please do, please do.
So in my time in the military, I learned a couple of more acronyms, of course, that I find helpful. One is one I use when I try to teach like planning classes and stuff like that, called BAMSIS, which is BAMCIS. Are you familiar with that one?
No, tell me about it.
Okay, so BAMSIS is basically when I say in civilian speak, it's brainstorming, arranging your research, conducting your research, complete the planning after all that stuff, implement your plan, and then supervise as you go along. And then there's for the different plans you talk about, like secondary plans and stuff like that. There's another acronym called PACE, PACE, for primary plan, second or alternative plan, contingency plan, and emergency plan. So those are a couple of possibly helpful things for people that are interested in those things. I just wanted to contribute that.
That's really useful and really appropriate. And again, the idea with a schema like that, like BAMSIS, which I will now possibly never forget, is that it forces you away from your biases. And it forces you to consider not only the things that you are comfortable considering, but the things you're uncomfortable about considering. And under stress, of course, which is why soldiers use this sort of thinking, and which is why I, as an old soldier, use this sort of thing. It allows your own inability to figure out what to do under stress to be caught by a net. You're not just swinging from the trapeze, you're swinging from the trapeze with a net of structure somewhere underneath you. So I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so everyone can go wild in a second. And